The day my grandmother passed away, I thought I had lost everything. She had been the heart of our family, the glue that held us together, and her death felt like an earthquake, shaking the very foundation of who I was. The funeral was somber, filled with tears and whispered goodbyes, but there was an eerie stillness that hung over me. I had never known life without her, and now, standing in her empty house, I felt a deep sense of loss that no one seemed to understand. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I had come to sort through her things, a duty I never imagined I'd have to face so soon. As I opened drawers, sifted through old photo albums, and examined keepsakes that held memories of another time, something caught my eye. It was a small yellowed envelope tucked into the corner of her desk drawer. My name was scrawled across the front, in her familiar handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. A letter addressed to me, written long before her passing, felt like a final message from the past. With trembling hands, I tore it open, and began reading her words. Dear Olivia, I know you may not understand now, but there will come a time when you will need to know the truth. Life isn't always as it seems, and I've carried a secret for many years. The time to tell you this has never felt right until now. Your mother wasn't my only daughter. I had another, a daughter who was taken from me too soon. I never spoke of her, not even to your mother. But she was real, and she was mine. I froze. My grandmother, who had always been so composed, so steady, had kept this monumental secret hidden from everyone, even from my own mother. The letter continued, detailing a painful story of loss, a child she had to let go of under heartbreaking circumstances, and the lasting grief she had carried all her life. She wrote about the circumstances of her daughter's death, the lies she had been forced to tell to protect those she loved, and the years she spent in silence, unable to move on from that tragedy. The letter ended with a request. I don't want you to carry this burden alone. Find her. Find the truth. For your own sake, and for the sake of your family. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the letter in disbelief. My grandmother had never spoken of this sister, her other daughter, at least not to me. I had always known her to be fiercely protective of her memories, keeping most of the family's past locked away. Yet here, in her final words, was a plea for me to uncover the truth. I knew that this revelation would change everything. It felt like a weight had been placed on my shoulders, one that I didn't feel prepared to carry. But what choice did I have? I couldn't ignore her final wish. I had to find this hidden piece of my family's past. The search wasn't easy. I began with old family records, visiting places I had never heard of, and speaking to people who knew more than they were willing to share. Piece by piece, the story began to emerge. My grandmother's lost daughter had been a young woman named Lily, a vibrant soul with a future ahead of her. But the details surrounding her death were shrouded in mystery. Some people spoke of an accident, while others hinted at something darker. As I dug deeper, I uncovered the truth. Lily had died under tragic, suspicious circumstances. But what struck me the most was the fact that my mother, too, had known about her sister's death. My grandmother had kept her secrets, but she had not kept them from my mother. It was a painful realization that my own mother had carried this secret as well, passing it down to me without ever speaking a word of it. The journey to uncover the truth led me to places I never thought I would visit. It led me to the people who had known Lily, to the people who had been involved in the cover-up. And in the end, it led me to a gravesite in a quiet, forgotten corner of the cemetery. There, beneath the surface of the earth, lay the woman who had never had the chance to live. As I stood over the gravestone, tears welled up in my eyes. I thought about the family I thought I knew, about the secrets that had been kept from me, and about the life that had been stolen away too soon. I thought about how my grandmother had carried this burden in silence for so long, how my mother had kept it hidden, and how, finally, the truth had come to light. I left the cemetery that day with a sense of closure, but also with a heavy heart. The past had been laid bare, and while it was painful, I felt a deeper understanding of my family, of the things they had endured, and of the love they had hidden away. My grandmother's secret had been revealed, but the journey didn't end there. It was now my responsibility to ensure that Lily's memory was not forgotten, that she was no longer a lost shadow in the corners of our family's history. It was up to me to carry on her legacy, to remember the sister who was taken too soon, and to keep her story alive for generations to come. In the end, I realized that uncovering the past wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about understanding the people who came before me, acknowledging their pain, and accepting that sometimes the truth is much more complicated than we could ever imagine. And so, I carried on, carrying the weight of my grandmother's secret, but also carrying the responsibility of ensuring that the truth was never forgotten. This story explores family secrets, the weight of hidden truths, and the emotional journey of uncovering a painful past. It's about self-discovery, healing, and the complexity of family dynamics. Let me know if you want any changes or additions. As the weeks passed, I felt myself drawn into a web of emotions I hadn't been prepared for. The family members I thought I knew so well were hiding pieces of themselves that only came to light through this painstaking search. My mother, although loving, had always been distant, her eyes sometimes clouded with unspoken memories. It wasn't just the normal distance of a mother with a busy life. It was something more, something I had never understood until now. One evening, I called my mother. Her voice, as always, was warm, but there was an edge to it, an unspoken hesitation. I hadn't yet told her about the letter. I hadn't even brought up Lily. My mother was never one to talk about her past, and I feared that what I had uncovered would bring up memories she wasn't ready to face. But now, standing on the precipice of this truth, I felt I had to tell her. "Mom," I began, taking a deep breath. "I found something today. Something about Grandma. Something important." I could hear her stiffen on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice now tinged with curiosity, and a bit of fear. "Her letter. She wrote me a letter before she passed. She told me about Lily. About the daughter she lost." There was a long pause, and I could almost feel her pulling away from me. "Olivia, don't." Her voice was tight, strained. "It's not something you should go digging into. Leave it alone." I was taken aback by the sharpness in her tone, but I couldn't back down. I had already unearthed too much. "But I need to understand. Grandma wanted me to know the truth. She said there would come a time when I would have to." There was a long silence on the other end. I could tell my mother was struggling to hold herself together. "I know," she whispered, barely audible. "But it's not a truth that anyone should have to carry." My mother told me everything. The life of Lily, the daughter my grandmother had never let anyone forget, even as she tried to bury the pain. Lily had been the brightest star in my grandmother's world. A wild spirit with big dreams and a heart full of life, she had been everything my mother had never been. Outspoken, fearless, and unapologetically herself. But Lily's light had been snuffed out too soon, in an accident that had forever altered the course of their lives. The details, as my mother explained, were a blur of confusion. A car crash, a drunk driver, and the ensuing chaos that had torn their family apart. Lily had been just 16 when it happened, her life snatched away before she could fully blossom. My grandmother had never recovered from that loss. She had held on to the grief, burying it beneath layers of responsibility and duty. She had never allowed herself to grieve openly, not even to my mother. And so, the story of Lily remained a secret, one that lingered in the shadows, hidden from the world. The guilt of not being able to protect her sister weighed heavily on my mother, and yet she, too, had kept that burden hidden. The more I learned, the more I understood the silent toll it had taken on my family. My grandmother, my mother, both women had been shaped by loss in ways I could never have imagined. And now, in this moment of revelation, I began to see them not just as family members, but as people who had lived through their own quiet storms, each one carrying the weight of a lost love. In the days that followed, I found myself lost in reflection. The anger I had felt for my grandmother's secrecy slowly morphed into understanding. She had kept this truth locked away not out of malice but out of love and fear. She had loved me enough to protect me from the pain she had lived with. But now that I knew, I couldn't ignore it. I had to honor Lily's memory. I had to ensure that her life, however brief, was not forgotten. The letter my grandmother had written became my guidepost, the map that led me to understand the depth of her sacrifice. I didn't just uncover the tragic story of Lily's death. I uncovered the life my grandmother had lived, one of quiet strength and endless love for the family she had left behind. I visited the cemetery more often after that. Each time I stood before Lily's grave, I felt a sense of connection to her, as though she was still there, a part of something greater than the tragedy that had claimed her. She was not just a forgotten name in a family history. She was a story, a life, and I was determined to keep her memory alive. Over time, my relationship with my mother deepened. We began to talk about Lily, about the grief they had shared and the pain they had both carried. Slowly, the walls between us started to come down, and I began to see my mother not just as the woman who had raised me but as someone who had endured heartbreak in silence, carrying a weight she never asked for. Through this journey, I realized that family isn't just about shared blood. It's about shared pain, healing, and the stories that bind us together. My grandmother's secret had changed everything, but in many ways, it had also brought us closer. I had come to understand that while we can never erase the past, we can choose how we carry it forward. And so, as I stood by Lily's grave once more, I whispered the words I had never spoken before. I remember you. I will remember you always. And in that moment, I knew that the legacy of love, pain, and resilience would live on. Through me, through my mother, and through the story we would carry into the future. This extended part deepens the emotional journey of the character, exploring themes of grief, discovery, and connection with family. It showcases how family secrets, though painful, can ultimately lead to healing and understanding. Let me know if you want to explore this story even further or if you'd like any adjustments.